Hello everyone, welcome to Witch Ways. Today I'm doing a Q&A from my Patreon subscribers and from the people who follow me here on YouTube. So I hope you enjoy all the answers to the really good questions that were asked. So the first question comes from one of my Patreon subscribers. And they ask, what are some of the magical things you do with salt? Have you ever used different kinds of salt differently, like sea salt versus mineral salt? And I do use different types of salt slightly differently, although overall I use salt very similarly as a clearer and a protector. So sea salt, I feel, carries more of that ocean dissolving energy, and I tend to use it for baths of rebirth and regeneration and dissolving and clearing things off of me. Whereas land salt, that usually does come from sedimentary layers within the earth, or often from dried lakes or ponds or beaches inland. I feel like land salt, or rock salt as it sometimes is known, has more of a slightly protective edge to it. It also has that clearing edge, but it has more of a protective edge. So I will tend to use that salt more for sprinkling around the edges of things that I want protected, like spells or doorways or windows. I make a protective salt that I use all the different kinds of salt. I use land salt, I use sea salt, I use the pink Himalayan salt, which who knows where that really comes from, and also the Mediterranean sea salt crystals, which again, who knows where that comes from, if it really comes from the Mediterranean. But I combine all those together. I feel like those crystal salts give a little bit of a special oomph to the blend overall. And then I finely powder rosemary and blue vervain in there. And I use that for general protection and general clearing in around things, as I said before, and also in baths or showers, just as a scrub for clearing things off of myself. So the next question is advice about working with dragons. And dragons are something that I am not an expert on, but many of the people in my magical circle are. I generally find for myself that the way I think of them as being really creatures that are outside of time and space, and that they can move between multiple realities. And in fact, I feel like maybe that's what wormholes are on a magical level, not on a scientific level, but on a magical level, that wormholes are the routes that dragons travel between universes and realms. That's just a personal belief. That's not something that's traditional lore. I feel like that what I've gotten from my friends that work strongly with dragons is they tend to be very fiercely loyal and very protective, and that you need to honor those qualities when you work with them. And in general, anytime you're working with supernatural beings, I feel that they will let you know what they need from you, and maybe start with making an altar. And the next question is about working with elementals in the winter months. And I don't work with elementals any differently in the winter months than I do the rest of the year. What I like to do with them is to notice them when I see them or sense them around, and just let them know I see them and say hello. It's just respectful. The other thing that I do with working with the elements in general, because I do incorporate elemental magic, is that I go through phases where every morning I'm offering a song or an acknowledgement for each of the elemental cardinal points. And that is just very simple. This time of year right now, I'm doing offerings for below, middle world, and overworld, but often in the summer months, I tend to do a little more prayer or blessing or acknowledgement each morning of the elements, just by kind of going outside, facing each direction, and honoring and noticing all the beings that reside in that quarter. All right, the next question was, what are your thoughts on non-daily or inconsistent practitioners, those who ride the wave of the seasons and fall in and out of it as needed in their lives? Do you find this to be a valid way of practicing? And I would say yes, absolutely. And in fact, that's the way that I've lived my life for a huge part of it. And there have been times, in fact, when I've been a little distressed, when it seems like, there's not much magic happening, I'm not really doing anything, but it's just a little resting place that you can integrate. And the reality is we all live in a culture where time is not given for us to really take care of ourselves, much less really take care of our magical practices. So I absolutely find that a valid way to practice. Now, for myself at the age that I am now, I am a dedicated priestess, which I'm going to talk about in a minute. And my home is my temple. And so I actually do pretty much practice every day, and I have some regular things that I do just because that's a commitment I've made. But I don't think that that's something that people need to do for all their life or at all. It just depends on what your desires are. Here's the next question. And it says, this is going to be a tough one. How do you practice witchcraft if you also have OCD, knowing that magical thinking is a major problem for those with the disorder, and knowing the importance of having faith, using intention, and understanding the power of your thoughts as a witch, while trying to learn that you are not your thoughts when it comes to intrusive thoughts? So I want to thank you for asking this question. And I think that it's part of a bigger cultural mindset that is not really helpful for people who are neurodivergent or who have OCD. And that mindset is the Western idea that everything revolves around our thoughts. Our thoughts are the most important thing. And I think a lot of new spirituality has focused a lot on the positive thinking and the power of your thoughts, and your thoughts affect your reality. And of course they do, but to me, that's very different than the way that I do magic. And maybe this will be helpful and maybe it won't. But what I find is I try and work in a more somatic way. Feel what's happening in my body and try and drop my sensation, my eyes, my ears, my sensations into from my chest down to about my hips, and try and imagine that part of my body being warm and running energy down my hands and arms, and then pushing that out when I do magic, and that being the cue that helps create magic rather than just my thoughts, because I think all kinds of shit all the time, and I wouldn't want it to all be going out. So for myself, even though I don't have OCD, I have trained myself to make sure that magic doesn't happen unless I'm running that energy and pushing it out somatically with my body. And I'm not sure if that will work for you, but I find that to be helpful with a lot of people in general, of all kinds of backgrounds. So hopefully that will help you. And I would suggest also, if you aren't already trying to find a group of witches online that have OCD, I think that would be a very powerful means of support. You may already have totally found that for yourself. So the next question is, when doing spell work, does the power of the spell wane over time, or does the practitioner's intent decide that? So what I would say is it really depends. I find that things that I do that are sort of herbal charms and spells last anywhere from 3 months to a year max. So those kind definitely wane over time. When I'm doing a major spell working with lots of people that has a lot of parts and is very complex, I feel like I let go of it and that rolls out, and then it just kind of keeps going forever. The way that I experience it myself is I experience the effects of it on me for a couple of years. And in terms of all other kinds of spells, I think it really varies according to the intention of the caster. Often people will work with moon phases to limit the time or to create sort of a time frame for the spell to work and take action. And what I find is helpful for me is when I do a spell, I set up an altar, and I notice when that altar starts feeling just kind of dusty and neglected, and there's no juice in it anymore, it doesn't look bright and shiny to me anymore, then I feel like the spell's power has waned, and I take the altar down, clear things off, dispose of what I need to, and move forward. But I do feel like if you need a spell that's going to work ongoing, you can just do it once. You might have to add little reminders for yourself, refreshers, where you relight a candle once a year and recommit yourself to that work. So the next question is, tell us a little about your witchy career. Are you initiated in any traditions? Do you have a coven? Who did you learn your witchcraft from? Things like that. I am initiated in a few traditions. However, I don't feel like that's necessary for people to practice witchcraft. I did start practicing in various kinds of informal circles. Then after that, I did form a coven with several people. However, we all live in different parts of the world now, so we haven't done magic together in many years. I worked with one group in Eugene that was a ritual theater group, and I also have worked on and off over the years with a great group of peers. And I am initiated. I was initiated into the reclaiming tradition, and I also was initiated into what's called the fairy tradition, and there's lots of different kinds of fairy traditions. This was FERI, and the founders of that lineage were Victor and Cora Anderson. In terms of the places I learned, I used to go to reclaiming witch camps, and I actually just learned a ton by doing. I just started doing, I'd read a book and try things out, and that's mostly where I learned. I have been particularly interested in learning songs and chants pertaining to witchcraft or all manner of ancient songs from Celtic culture. Do you have any favorite resources for learning songs to use in ritual or daily use? Particularly interested in songs that can be offered to spirits or the land in thanks, or do you mostly learn them through community? And then they had a follow-up question about being respectful of cultural context. So what I do is I actually learn almost all my songs from community. I would say that a good resource to find songs is online at Reclaiming Collective. They have a wide variety of songs that are honoring and specifically in tune to different parts of the season. I don't know that they have any that I've seen that are honoring the land per se. And you can check those out. They have like 3 or 4 different albums out about them, and it's totally fine to use them. They've been rewritten a ton of times. As long as you aren't claiming them yourself and re-recording them, it's fine. And one of the things I like about them is the tunes are really easy to learn and pretty simple to sing usually. They're not all, I would not say they're from Celtic culture. I'd say they're traditional, contemporary, pagan, and they can be rewritten. And just find words that you like to put in there. It takes some time to get that, but you'll get it. I learn a lot of songs from my students. They tend to write songs. I've been fortunate to live in community where people share and record and use a lot of songs magically. And so I have a lot of songs that I've written down over the years that I use as needed. One of the things that I would recommend is researching for yourself this book, the Carmina Gadelica. It's an expensive book. It's going to probably be out of print at some point soon. And it has like hundreds of blessings, incantations, and prayers. And you could take portions of those blessings and prayers and then put the words to either a tune that you create or try to reframe the words to fit into one of those songs from Reclaiming. And in terms of cultural context, I think that's a very interesting question. Obviously, as you know already, when you ask this question, we don't want to be taking songs from indigenous traditions out of context. And I think that's just being started to be talked about in terms of what if it's our culture, but we don't live there and aren't in touch with that community that is passing that tradition down. And I would say that it's one of those areas that I think there's going to be some very interesting discussion coming up over the next few years. And I think that's part of a bigger ongoing discussion. All right, the next question is, how can you work with your pet as an animal familiar? I have cats in the spirit realm now who have a lot of opinions on that. I've worked with cats and dogs primarily as familiars over the years, and some ways that you can work with them is to just start to notice if they want to work with you magically. So they might show up and want to come sit with you when you're doing any kind of magic. And then if that's the case, just invite them to participate and let them know it's all right to be involved. The other thing that you can do is they may tell you what types of magic that they're interested in working with you on, because I find that for many of the animals I've had, they don't always work with me on everything. Some of them have had very specific tasks. Like I had one cat who would help me find things that were lost. I had another cat that was very specifically interested in helping me travel to fairy. I had one cat who was a very bossy spirit guide, very lovely. I had another one who was a protector. I've had dogs that were very, very protective and would travel with me to other realms. And so it's just been kind of different with everyone that I've had. So just start inviting them to work with you. Notice when they're around, notice when they leave the circle, and just kind of start to work with them over time in the ways that they show up. Traditionally, the belief is that pets that are familiars or animals that are familiars can help you travel to other realms, that sometimes they will allow you either to ride them to other realms in the astral journey kind of way, or that they will allow you to shapeshift or borrow their form to safely travel, or they'll go with you as a protector and a guardian. That's one kind of piece of traditional thought around animals as familiars. And the other piece of information about that that's traditional is that they lend you their qualities. So for instance, the bouncy, vibrant health loyal energy of a dog can be something that you can call on magically if you need that, or the ability to have stealth and to track things down and be a really good hunter is a quality of a cat. And you might be able to borrow that energy from them. I always like it to be reciprocal. My friends joke that I always treated my cats like gods, and yeah, I kind of did, but I feel like they did a lot for me magically. And so I always made where I fed them a little bit like an altar with pictures and magical symbols on it, and just really supported them and nurtured them and let them lead the way in terms of what they wanted to do and encouraged them. Okay, and the final question is one I could do a whole video on, and some people have. So how does someone practice tuning an ability to sense energy? I feel like I just guess half the time, which might not be the best way of knowing if something is cleansed or charged. I think this relates a lot back to that question I answered about OCD and neurodivergency, which is in Western culture, we are so trained to be in our minds, and our minds are always like, did I? Didn't I? Is it working? Is it not? And even if we know that something's working, our mind kind of wants to second guess us. So here's some things that I try to do to just kind of get out of the way of my mind. And the first thing I do is to try and use my hands to sense energy. And one of the things you can do is just simply start by trying to move your hands close together and notice when you feel energy. And if you have it might take some time to practice that, but just keep practicing. The other thing you can do is pick up various objects and close your eyes and notice what they feel like in your hand. Sometimes it's easier for people if they pick up two different objects, one that they like and one that they don't like, one that they're repelled by, one that they're drawn to, and hold in their hand. And just notice like which feels weightier. What are the cues for you when you're holding something in your body that you feel like you do like? And what are the cues when it's something you're holding something that you don't like? I think that can start to teach you whether or not something is active or not active. That can be very helpful. Another thing that I teach people about sensing energy, again, is to use your body, asking yourself, is it cleared or charged? If you're wanting, basically what you're wanting is a yes or no answer there. And so just put your hands there, again, over the object. And if it feels done, just tell your body you want your hands to kind of be pushed away when it's full of energy, when you're done charging. I know that sometimes, even for myself, I've been practicing a long time. And when I'm charging, there comes a point where I'm like, okay, I'm just gonna have to let go of this. And what I imagine doing then is pulling my hands out of the magic, like pulling them out of gloves and letting go, and then just giving the magic a little push to finish it off. And I found that doing that over time has cued my senses to notice when something is done, because I start feeling the urge to pull my hands away. Again, this is something that takes time. I find that softening your gaze and breathing deeply and just looking around at various objects and noticing what looks shiny and what looks dim. Things that are shiny have a good charge on them. Things that are dim might be faded. And I want to say, with all these techniques that I am sharing, and these are just a few, that everybody has different abilities and different ways of sensing things. So it might take you a while to figure out which thing works for you. Use herbs that are psychic openers like mugwort and burn them occasionally as incense. Those can be very, very helpful. Cinnamon also enhances psychic abilities. And then another thing you can do is to learn to use a pendulum for basic yes or no answers. So thanks so much, everyone, for sending in such good questions. If I missed your question, let me know. Write it in the comments. And I would love it if those of you watching would answer some of these questions as well, because I know there's a lot of witches out there that have a lot of experience, and I feel like what I might offer might not be the thing that works for you, but surely there is someone who does have that information. So if you're enjoying my content, please hit like and subscribe. Check out my Patreon page. I put a lot of information there for a monthly subscription rate, and I think you would like it. As always, stay safe and be well.